All right, welcome everybody to tonight's workshop about our Community Arts Partnership grant programs, along with some really good grant writing advice. You could keep yourself muted throughout the presentation, and I'm definitely going to have Q&A afterwards. So if you want to stick around for that, that would be great. I am Robin Schwartz. I'm the Program and Grant Director of the Community Arts Partnership of Tompkins County. I've been administering CAPS grants for over 30 years. I've been writing grants for CAP all that time, and I've also served on various statewide grant panels. So my experience comes from all of that. So this workshop tonight is geared specifically toward our grants, but much of the advice really transfers to any kind of grant proposals, I think. If you're watching this from October to December, I'm running these writing workshops live and on Zoom a number of times. The dates and live locations are on our grants page at artspartner.org, which is artspartner.org. There's live ones in Ithaca, Dryden, and Trumansburg, and it's this same presentation that I'm doing right now. It's kind of fun to go to a live one, and if you want to recommend it to anyone, it's all on our grants page. So each of our CAP grant programs is different. Each has different criteria. Each has different requirements of who can apply and who cannot apply. But in general, if you're not from Tompkins County, email me and I will tell you about the grants that I know about in your county. If you're not already on our mailing list, then the link to join is at the bottom of our homepage. So I'm going to pull up our presentation for tonight. You guys can see it, right? Mm-hmm. So CAP has been around for over 30 years, and our primary functions are securing and administering grants for Tompkins County artists and not-for-profits, and to provide programming and events that bring artists and audiences together. The Greater Ithaca Art Trail, the Spring Rights Literary Festival, the Ithaca Artists Market, our CAP ArtSpace Gallery, a really fun Capapalooza art sale, by the way. We accept, for December, we collect art, and the art that we collect is stuff that is previously owned. We don't want to ask artists for their own work. We want the stuff that your parents gifted you that you never liked, that's been in your closet for years, that your Aunt Edna did in her watercolor class in 1975. That's the fun stuff that we collect. That's on our website. We do professional development workshops. There's one coming up on November 21st, and we do networking events. Among other initiatives like public art programs and administration of the Tompkins County Poet Laureate. So we do a lot. There's only 2 of us, so oh my God. So tonight, I'm going to go over pretty quickly some just general info about grants, then I'm going to tell you about our CAP grants. But my goal with this presentation tonight is to give you a brief overview of our grant program so you could get a sense of what they are, and then you could look into them yourself and you could email me questions, because what I want to spend most of my time on tonight is grant writing advice. And by the way, this PDF slide presentation you're looking at is on our grants page at artspartner.org, along with this recording that I'm making right now. So after I tell you all my grant writing advice, this presentation will conclude with an example of a poorly written application, and I'll explain why, and then the same request written really well. So in a nutshell, I hope that this presentation helps your request rise to the top of the pile. I want you to know how we make decisions about which request to fund and what to do and what not to do about writing a grant. And I'm just going to pause the recording for a minute. So, first page, what is a grant? A grant is usually money awarded through a competitive application process for something tangible, like you have to do something with the money. It's got to be a project or a capital improvement or something. Funders could be government entities. 3 of our grants are from New York State, public or private family foundations. Our SOS grant is a private foundation and CAP fundraising. And the county funds another grant that we administer. So those are usually the people who have the money. We had a surplus in 2024 and used it for a second round of our SOS grant funding. If you know anyone who would like to fund or contribute to a grant, please get in touch. The impact is huge for our county. Since 1993, CAP has distributed almost $7 million. In 2024, that number was $580,000. None of it was our money. It was given to us to re-grant. The word fellowship generally, you know, the convention isn't consistent across the entire world, but generally a fellowship is a gift. Like you can get a new refrigerator or with that money. There's no strings attached. So that's what is a grant. About grants in general, every grant is completely different. And every grant you come across is going to require different actions and have different requirements. The goals are going to be different. The criteria is going to be different. How decisions are made is different. We use a panel and a rating process, but if it's a family foundation, it must just be a couple of people sitting around the dinner table just making personal choices. We have a panel that meets in person. Some grants will just use a rating system. Eligibility requirements differ. Like for our grants, one of the grants is for individuals and you need to be 18 and over. Another one of the grants, you have to be a not-for-profit. I'm going to go over all of these. So the eligibility, and sometimes there's residency requirements. Format, I'm still in the dark ages. I'm still using a Word doc for our grant applications, whereas everyone else uses a grant-making platform. Some grants will take you 15 minutes, some 8 days, Tompkins County tourism grants. Our grants will take a bit of time, somewhere in between 15 minutes and 8 days. You need to take a look at our materials well ahead of time, so you get a sense of how long it's going to take you and what info you might need to gather. My job is to help people write the grants and give these workshops. Some of our grants are from New York State Council on the Arts, and their program is called Statewide Community Regrants, SCR. And my job, I'm hired by them. My job as an SCR coordinator is to provide a great deal of help. I wrote here, availability for you to ask questions. Not all funding organizations have a person for you to ask questions of. Financial. We like if you get a grant and we know your project is going to happen, we just give you the money. There are other granting agencies will want you to submit receipts before they give you a check. Every grant has different financial and record keeping requirements. There's always going to be funder acknowledgement requirements. We give you language that you have to put in posters and online and social media and our logo acknowledging where the funds came from. Contracts and agreements, our contracts have that acknowledgement information in them. Final and interim reporting requirements. We have a final report. We don't require an interim report. And the time limit for a project occurrence. Did I spend occurrence correctly? There is, we have a bit of leeway. Ideally, the projects that we're funding for 2025 will happen in 2025, but it bleeds over a little bit into 2026. We're fine with that. I want to show you on our website where our resources are. One of the tabs says local arts orgs and resources, and it says links for artists. I'm not going to go through this. I want to show you what's there. There's information about New York State Council on the Arts, which is generally an organization for organizations. NYFA is for individuals. Candid and Candid Learning, the tourism grants. Tompkins Festival is a really cool program. They will lend you equipment, technical assistance, access if you're having an outdoor or festival type of event. On that page, there's other resources. I love the Human Services Coalition. If you're on a board and you have any problems having to do with the board and staff relations, golden. Nikon, I'll let you look at that. You'll also see there's something called Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. And this is just a slide from NYFA. If you're an artist and you're not on their mailing list, you should get on their mailing list because this is an amazing organization with a ton of professional development. They are fiscal sponsors. They have awards and grants, lots of online resources. So get on NYFA.org's mailing list. So this slide shows the kind of things that you might be asked if you're applying for a grant. You might be asked for an artist statement, a bio, or a resume. An artist statement is generally a statement about your artwork. A bio is usually about yourself, and a resume is usually a chronological list of the publications, exhibits, how you've shared your art, or an organization mission. We do not ask for an artist statement or a bio, we ask for a resume. Brief summary of project. By the way, not all artists have resumes. I've really gone back and forth about this. A lot of musicians especially, there's no resume. But then it's hard to compare for our, for example, SOS grant, which is about an artist's career. It's hard to compare an artist who just wrote a paragraph from another artist who has submitted like a 4-page resume. So now I'm asking for resumes, although I'm saying that they can be very brief and just outline career highlights or summaries. Like if you're a gig musician, you can write, I've done 50 performances in Tompkins County bars, festivals, and venues in 2024. Like I'm not saying you have to break out every single occurrence of every single thing you did. That information is all in the grants. You should know what your budget expenses are. Oh, look, here's a typo. You should know what your expenses are before you start, because really what are you applying for a grant for is your expenses. So you need to know what they are. Your expected and targeted audience who's coming, and the impact and outcomes. What fabulous things are happening? Why are we doing this? A timeline. How will you advertise? Do you know what you're doing? Letter of support or confirmation from partner organizations. Sometimes like we'll get an application from someone as an individual saying, I'm doing this huge event in the Tompkins County Public Library. And I'm like, do they know? So sometimes we require a partner letter from an organization. And sometimes there's a work sample. Only one of our grants has that work sample. So for us, for our CAP grants, the guidelines and applications are posted in September. Right now I'm doing the publicity outreach workshop part. There's deadlines in January and February. Then I select a panel. The panel meets. Funding decisions are made in late February. I collect contracts. I need W-9 forms for individuals, not for applications from organizations. Checks are mailed or we do automatic deposit. And then there's some follow-up. So our process is starting up right now with deadlines in January and February. Now, I just want to show you, this is again our homepage. Under grants, this is where you'll find all of our grant information. On that page, you will see we have 3 grant programs that are from New York State Council on the Arts. They are the GAP grants for arts programs, which we call GAP, the Artist and Community Grant, and the Arts Education Grant. That's money from New York State Council on the Arts. We have $200,000, which is really good. And then we have our Strategic Opportunity Stipend, SOS, which is due in February, and that's funded through a private foundation. We did have a second round in 2024 that was from CAP fundraising. I'm not sure whether that's going to happen or not. Depends on our fundraising. So don't bet on it. Right now, we have that one deadline in February for SOS. And then there's a grant that I don't administer. The executive director, Megan Barber, administers the ACOD grant, which is Arts and Cultural Organizational Development. Those are the big organizations. It's county money for our big tourism assets like the Cuca Chamber Orchestra, Cinemapolis, Community School of Music and Arts, Dorothy Cotton Jubilee Singers, Hanger, History Center, Ithaca Children's Garden. I won't read them all, but there's about 10 more big arts organizations that get the ACOD grant. Information about that is on our website. So for those 3 grants that are New York State Council on the Arts grants, we share priorities. It's a statewide effort to make exemplary arts programming available to geographically, ethnically, and racially diverse segments of the state's population, and to support the continued development of local cultural resources responsive to community cultural needs. What that means is we give priority to bringing arts to under-resourced people or areas. For Tompkins County, that's definitely includes rural audiences and our urban core. We want to make sure that our grant awards, so in the old days, like when I started this in the 90s, NISCA's guidelines were fund excellence. That was it. And so there was just a lot of events that all had what I call the usual suspects, like the same 300 people that went to all events. And as the years went by, it changed. And now it's like, let's get this money into every nook and cranny and to as many populations and communities as possible across Tompkins County. There was a few years where, now we're talking about the 90s, where the directive from NISCA was to make sure every event had a diverse audience. That doesn't happen. The people in Groton are going to go to a Groton concert series, but they're not coming to Ithaca. And people in Ithaca are not going to the Groton concert series. It's okay to have an audience that you define for our grants, the Groton community, the Groton rural community. But we want to make sure that our grants as a whole are reaching a variety of places in the county. And, without our grants, there's a Groton concert series, there's a Groton programming at the library, there's a Groton art show. That wouldn't happen without these grants. So we're very happy when an under-resourced community or peoples or region get the opportunity for great art. So the type of art that's funded, I have to say this too, because I'm always going to get applications for martial arts or culinary arts. For the NISCA grants, the art that we fund has to be in line with their expectations that we're funding visual art, public art, performances of theater, music, dance, poetry, fiction, or creative nonfiction readings, art film screenings, and the like. Here's a really important sentence. As opposed to an activity, the outcome of which is primarily rehabilitative, spiritual, or religious, educational, therapeutic, or recreational. All art is going to be educational, therapeutic. Art can be recreational. That's fine. But art must be art must be the intention of the project. For example, there was a project that came in where an art therapist wanted to do a workshop about using art collage to help with anxiety and depression, which was amazing, but it's not this grant because it's primarily neuroscience or therapy. We used to have something in town called compost theater. It was basically theater talking about compost. And, was it theater or it was deemed to be primarily educational. So that's what I mean by the outcome has to be primarily arts. So the first of our grants is the Grants for Arts program. These guidelines are long and dense. What we fund, what we don't fund, who can apply, who cannot apply, there's a lot. So I'm just going to give you a general sense of these. And if you're interested, you could dive deeper from our website. So the GAP grant, this one is for public events that are open to the general public. Performances, all that stuff I mentioned before. The applicant for this one can be a Tompkins County not-for-profit organization, municipality, or tribal nation. If you're an individual or a group without not-for-profit status, I need to help you find a not-for-profit sponsor so you could apply for this grant, or you may have a not-for-profit sponsor. I don't care if the not-for-profit has any connection to art, although there are some tax laws that may make a difference. For example, if you're a member of a church congregation and they want to sponsor you, that's great. I don't care if their mission has anything to do with your project. We just have to write a check to a not-for-profit for this particular grant. I just want to briefly mention that it says here, organizations applying directly to NISCA cannot apply. There are 30 organizations in town that apply directly to New York State Council on the Arts. They cannot also apply for these grants. It's double dipping. And they can also not be fiscal sponsors. They are listed on our website, but they are The big ones, they're the kitchen, the hangar, the cherry, the civic ensemble. Cornell, I see, Ithaca Murals, Storyhouse Ithaca. They've all gone directly to NISCA. I have that list if anyone wants to know. You can use their venue. Like if you want to do an event at the Kitchen Theater, that's fine, but it can't be a Kitchen Theater event. It has to be you using or renting the Kitchen Theater. So that's the GAP grant, and there's more about it. Grants are awarded to Tompkins County not-for-profits like libraries, arts organizations, the smaller ones, town, villages, community centers, or to Tompkins County individuals or groups using a not-for-profit, professional quality arts projects, accessible, open to, and promoted to the general public. For this one, it cannot be an organization's membership. It has to be truly open to the general public. You can gear it toward an argument, toward a community. It can be geared toward seniors or geared toward teens or geared to a neighborhood, but anyone who wants to come needs to be able to. Preference is given to requests that fill community needs and reach diverse cultures and communities. The maximum is $5,000 to request. That's all we can give you. But that's a maximum for all 3 of the NISCA grants. Like if you wanted to apply for a GAP grant for a theater production, but you also wanted to apply for an arts education grant, we can't have you apply. We can't give you more than $5,000 if you get both grants. So I'll let you read more about that one if you're interested. The Artist and Community Grant is different than it was last year, in case you read the guidelines last year. Last year, it was for the creation of new work that is then shared with a community. This time, it's just the community. Tompkins County artists to share their work in an immersive way with a local community of their choosing. This is about really like a deep interaction with people, more than just saying, I'm having an exhibition, go see it. It's about talking to people about who you are as an artist and helping them understand what it is to be an artist, and maybe help them understand that they might like to try doing some art. I personally don't think that, I think everyone should do art. It doesn't matter if they're bad at it or good at it or any of those things. Everyone should just do something. So this one says the Artist and Community Grant supports Tompkins County artists who work with communities and you can pick who you want to work with too. This can be a closed community. You could work with people who are part of a program, who are members of a community center. So you can work with communities in an immersive and impactful way. Participant size is a consideration. The maximum request for this one is $3,000. Last year, there was a couple of people who wanted to do presentations at the library, and they didn't get funded because there was no way to know whether anyone would show up. You know, like if you have a community, like let's say there was a woman who she volunteered at Loaves and Fishes and wanted to do a little journaling project at Loaves and Fishes. She knew there were going to be people there who were into it. But when you're doing something and you don't know who's coming or if anyone will come, then it might drop lower in the ratings. Like for this workshop tonight, there were like 20 people who signed up and there's 3 people here. So that's how it is. It's hard to get people to come to things. So if you have a defined audience for this grant, it is better. By the way, the due dates were here as well. This one's due January 17th. Our arts education grant is for teaching artists to go into the schools, K-12 population, after-school programs, or a closed student group or community organizations, and teach a kids an art form. At least 3 sessions with the exact same group of kids. I'll let you read more about that if you're interested. And our SOS grant is different. This one is the privately funded one. This one is for for artists who want to take advantage of an opportunity anywhere in the world. This past round, there was somebody invited to receive a book award in Nevada, Plain Fair. Somebody else who was invited to premiere their music in a European country, Plain Fair. Somebody else who, so that you could actually look, by the way, on this website, we have a list of recent grantees. So you can see who got the grant and what it was for. It could be an opportunity in Tompkins County, but generally this grant is great because it's not Tompkins County bound. So now I'm going to talk about the grant writing advice. This is my favorite part. Keep this in mind. It is a competition. You are in competition with everyone else who's applying. This is true for grants applying to our programs, to our gallery. It's a competition. And by the way, we have 200,000 for our NISCA grants and 24 for the SOS. We'll probably have about 60 applicants for our CAP grant, about 30 for the Artist and Community grant, about 15 for the Arts Ed grant. The total, I'm getting, this is based on past experience. The total we're going to get for all of those is about 350,000 in requests, and we're going to have 200,000 available. So that's what I mean by a competition. We can't fund everyone. So people think, well, my request fits the guidelines, I'll probably get funded. And that's not true because we don't have enough money to go around. There's frequently more good requests submitted than we can fund. So if you don't read the guidelines, if you don't take the time to answer the questions that were asked, if you don't send the required attachments, you're going to drop down and others will rise up above you. So it's a competition thing is crucial to just keep in your heads. A lot of times when I write emails to people about why they didn't get a grant, I'm like, you know what? There was nothing wrong with it. I looked at the draft, it was great, but other people just got a better rating. And then I could tell you why if people ask. I never tell people what the panel said. I never comment on the art itself, but I could say, here's what you were rated on, and here's where other people got higher ratings. So that leads me to how do panels make decisions? Our panelists, how do CAP panels make decisions? So our panelists, by the way, if you guys want to be on a panel, not for a grant that you applied for, but if you want to be on a panel, it's really cool to see this on the other end, Panelists have the materials for a few weeks to read and study. Like if the deadline is January 17th, I'm going to get the panel, the materials by January 19th and schedule the panel meeting in early February. So they have time to read it all and study it and ask questions. They receive an orientation, by the way. The panel then meets for discussion on Zoom. And we just discuss the requests alphabetically. Mustafa, you're always going to be first. People at the beginning of the alphabet. I often recommend that you change your last name to something at the beginning of the alphabet, because by the time we get to like Vivine Williams, we're like, the panel's like exhausted. Don't tell Vivine I said that. Oh no, I just taped this. Great. So panelists complete a rating sheet based on the criteria outlined in each grant's guidelines. I'm going to show you that rating sheet so you see exactly how it works. The staff, after the meeting is over, the staff then compiles the ratings and makes funding recommendations based on the ratings and each request budget and the amount available. Recommendations are then sent back to the panelists. So this is a really good system. The rating system is a great system because the panelists, before we ever did ratings in many eons ago, the panelists who were more passionate were kind of everyone, the shyer people on the panel would just go along with the people who felt more strongly with things. So we weren't getting a real sense of what people really felt. The Zoom ratings are anonymous. I am the only person who sees them. I send the completed ratings to the panelists and to our board, but I'm the only one that saw the individual panelists, so people get to be more honest. I really like this system. I want to show you, this is the sample, this is the criteria that's in the GAP grant. And this is what the panel is rating against. Community benefit, and you'll see it says ratings range from 1 to 5. 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. Community benefit, projects that demonstrate they're providing successful access to under-resourced or diverse communities. You don't have to do that, but you're going to get a higher rating. Projects that support the development of local cultural resources responsive to community cultural needs. Do people want this? Do people need this? Is this beneficial? Demonstrated community interest, support, and benefit. Anyone coming? Applicants' ability to effectively promote the funded program to the general public. Do the people who are attracting the general public know how to get them there? Artistic quality and program quality, adherence to these guidelines, and then there's even more feasibility and the applicant's history with regard to filling final reports and such. And then I'm just going to point out that the sample criteria for the Artist and Community Grant is different. They're different criteria. Some of it's the same: adherence to the guidelines, application completeness, strength of the applicant's artwork. That was not in the GAP grant. This one has a work sample. So each, the point I'm making is that look at the criteria, it's often different. This is just a little piece of a rating sheet that the panelists get. This was from last year for the GAP grant. I know this is really tiny and you can't really see it, but over here in this gray box is the criteria that I just showed you. And then down here, there's a list of the organizations, their website, which the panelists, you don't have to have a website, but the panel is going to check it out. The project, the request, and then there's columns for them to rate. And then there's scoring instructions. And I like this because these are given to me from New York State Council on the Arts. You know, scoring can be very subjective. So this actually defines, if you give it a 5, it means that it was an exceptionally strong model with essentially no weaknesses. And then it goes all the way down to 0. But then it also defines what is a weakness. They define a minor weakness as one that is easily addressed but does not substantially lessen impact. They define a moderate impact, a weakness, and a major weakness. So this way, the scores can be more cohesive. So here's my grant writing advice. Read the guidelines carefully and then read them again. It's sad when somebody fills out an entire application and didn't notice that we don't fund fundraisers. I have applications coming in from artists all over the world, and I'm like, hello, Tompkins County. They didn't read, they just saw the application and filled it out. So read the guidelines carefully. There's a lot of stuff in them. Take note of the criteria. Read the entire application before filling it out. For mine, like, since I'm just giving you a document, you can see what all the questions are. But if you're filling one out and it's like an online grant program and you're on a screen and then you write and then there's a next screen and you're like, oh, I just answered that. And then you go to the next screen, you're like, didn't I just answer that? So it's really good general advice to look at all the questions before you start filling it out. Follow directions exactly, don't improvise, because it's a competition. And I'm going to give you some examples of improvising. This is stuff that happens all the time. For years, I used to add, I stopped this year, I think. I used to ask for a list of board members for the not-for-profit applications. And people would say, I didn't enclose the list because you have it from last year. I don't have it from last year. I don't keep everything. Follow the directions, do not improvise. I'm just, one artist, this is somebody I know has sent me the application as an attachment, has sent me their resume as an attachment before. But this time I kept emailing going, I don't have your resume, I don't have your resume. And we went through the application process without the resume and they got a lower rating. And then I came to my office a couple weeks later because I work from home and the resume, she mailed it in the US post office. And I'm like, mailed it. I didn't get it. That's not what the directions said. That's what I mean. Do not improvise. Leave yourself plenty of time and compile the expenses and income before you write the narrative. What I mean by that is, I can see that doesn't sound right. Compile income. Know what your expenses and potential income is before you write the narrative. Income is always a guess. If you have income from ticket sales, it's going to be a guess based on past experience. So one last thing about that previous slide, the deadline. I wrote, leave yourself plenty of time. Emergencies happen. There's often unexpected requirements in the grant that you didn't expect and take some time to get together. But I get a lot of emails on the deadline day and something happened. They had COVID, their kid got sick, they locked themselves out of the house. Emergencies happen, but I have to have an even playing field. You know, if it's a program, like one of my, like an application coming in for the artist market, I'd be like, whatever, get it to me tomorrow. But for grants, I have to keep an even playing field. If I give one person an extension because they're sick, for example, I would have to e-blast my entire mailing list that everyone has an extension. And so there are no extensions unless there's like electricity is off in a wide area or internet is down in a wide area. Other line, the deadline is the deadline. I also get a lot of emails that the day of the deadline is inconvenient. Like someone might email me and say, you know, I have kids. Sunday is a really bad day to have a deadline. And I reply, I get it, but you've had the grant application for 3 months. You don't have to wait until the last day. Most people do. I used to have the grant deadline at midnight. I'm not doing that anymore because then I had to stay up till midnight. I now have a deadline at 8 p.m. for these grants. Grants start piling in at about 7 p.m., about an hour before. So it is okay. I don't care if you wait until the last minute, but if you miss the deadline, it is missed. Keep your narrative clear and factual. Although the panel reads all of the requests before they meet as a group, they may only discuss the request for minutes. So if we have a panel meeting and there are 60 requests and we discuss each one for 3 minutes, that's 180 minutes, that's 3 hours. So I have a timer that goes off when we're discussing these. You do not want the panel to spend those precious 3 or 4 minutes asking questions or trying to understand or unravel what you are asking for. When their applications are ranked against each other, the difficulty they may have had understanding your proposal may affect you rising to the top. So clarity. Do not use abstract, vague, or academic language. We will not understand it. Okay, I wrote this sentence and I'm not sure I should say it out loud, but I'm going to go for it. It's especially vexing when someone expresses that their art is inclusive and then uses the most vague, pompous vocabulary to describe it with words I've never heard of and have to look up. That's not accessible to the panel or to the community. However, here's the thing. If you're writing grants to a sculpture studio and you're a sculptor, yes, the language is different. If you're an academic and you're writing an academic proposal, the writing is going to be different. You need to know your audience, or need to know who's on the panel. These grants, the panelists are community members. For the GAP grant, they may not even be artists. So you want to know who you're talking to. Like if you're, here's what this is one of the reasons I love looking at drafts, because I can make suggestions. Like our SOS grant is about artist opportunities. There was someone who was a professor who had an opportunity to hang their paintings in a restaurant for sale. And this was a new opportunity for them. It was a perfect SOS grant. But their application said that they wanted to embed their art into the social and economic structure around the local tourism and hospitality industry. I had to call them up and say, I don't understand. What are you doing? And then they said, oh, I want to hang my art in a restaurant. I said, just say that. I have more examples of that, but I think I've made the point. I don't have to go through all the examples. Useful sentences. Specific details are what is needed. Tell us the who, what, where, when, and why. Where is it happening? Who is coming? Who is part of it? Answer each question carefully. If I could sum up my grant writing advice, it would be read the question and make sure you answer what was actually asked. For example, the SOS grant is for artist opportunities that will impact their career. The question in the SOS grant is describe in great detail how this project or opportunity will impact your professional art career. Please be very specific and provide examples. One person who just applied responded, this exhibit will increase my exposure and may lead to future opportunities. That didn't really answer the question. It's also a competition. Someone else will have answered that question in tremendous detail. Someone else might have, maybe let's say somebody's asking for travel funds to attend a publishing conference with the intention of getting their novel published. That person may explain in detail how being at the conference will introduce them to very specific people that they'll get a chance to talk to and ask advice of and put their novel right in front of. They might have a timeline, like when I get back from the conference, I'm going to write these people these letters and apply to these places. That's going to be in competition with the person who said, this will increase my exposure. So that's another example of competition. Also, there's a question in the SOS grant that people have a tendency to answer incorrectly. And I'm just going to mention it if you're applying to SOS. One of the criteria for the SOS grant is whether you've had a presence in Tompkins County. With so little money available, we want to prioritize artists who have some showing or involvement in Tompkins County. So the last question in the SOS grant, after you've gone, described your opportunity, the last question is, what is your personal Tompkins County community impact? Have you shown or shared your art in Tompkins County in the past? For example, have you had exhibits? Have you run workshops? Have you been part of events, performances? Describe briefly using a maximum of 4 sentences. I think that's clear. Someone just answered, the exhibit I'm proposing for my SOS grant offers a localized view of climate change while also recognizing the deep history of agriculture in our county. That didn't answer that question. So when we got to the rating sheet and it said, this person's involvement in Tompkins County, they got a 0 because they didn't answer the question, so they didn't have the information. I should have caught that in the draft, and I didn't. That's another thing about the drafts. I love to look at draft applications and make suggestions, but it's not a guarantee. I'm not the one making the decisions. And I may miss something, especially if drafts are coming in really fast and furious. But it's a really good idea to send me a draft. Do not exaggerate. Don't say you had 200 people at a performance if you have 20, because I guarantee you one of the panelists was there and they'd be like, wait a minute. Don't make up numbers. If your project costs $1,000 and you make up additional expenses because the maximum request is $5,000, it will work against you. It will look padded and made up, and you are in competition. There's that concept again, with people who are just asking for what they need. There was a $5,000 application for a concert at a local venue last year. I know how much the rent is for the space they were renting, and in this request, it was tripled. And they asked for $1,000 for equipment that I know that venue provides for free as part of the rental. And then they had 4 different people being paid $500 to administer the project, which is fine to pay administrators. But this was just one concert with 2 people in it. So I had to email and say, what are those 4 people doing? And they couldn't answer. Why do you need $500 for costumes? They didn't know the answer. They were just trying to get their maximum request. So don't do that, because know that you're going to be asked. Have someone else proof for clarity and completeness. We're not judging people on their writing skills, by the way. Writers are going to write better. What we need are the facts, the questions, answers, and the attachments attached. If English is not your first language, we can help. Just let us know. If you can't open the documents, if you don't have a computer, just let us know. We'll help. But it's good to have someone else proof it, because it's even better if that person doesn't know anything about your request, because you don't realize what you leave out when you're so close to it, and someone else may be able to spot things that are unclear. I like reading it out loud. I think you find a lot of weird sentences when you read it out loud. Presentation counts. I mean, again, I'm still doing like an old-fashioned document, so just make sure it's all one font, choose one font, choose one color, choose one size so that doesn't all look all mishmashed. Hopefully next year I'm going to be using a grant platform, so that will be moot. Draft review. Again, I just talked about that. I love this slide. Do not project an attitude. Avoid criticism, because it's going to start a discussion. Like if you say, for some reason, Ithaca shuns women's theater, those 3 minutes you have for discussion, the panel will start to discuss whether that's true or not. So you don't want to necessarily project any criticism or negativity in a grant. Right for this person, not for this person. I was just on a panel for New York State Council on the Arts and read 110 requests from arts councils and arts organizations around the state. And the ones that used a lot of generic language all kind of ran together, and I could not keep them apart in my head. It's really hard to remember all those requests. And I'm not talking now about incomprehensible, vague language. I'm talking about just generic language, such as, we're committed to providing an equitable environment for community members to enjoy our programs. What I mean by generic is that everyone uses that same sentence. Everyone has paragraphs like that. And we want that. We want that to happen. We want to know you're doing that. Excellent. But for people to remember your application, it's good to also put in examples. We will do that by having our concerts at the local high school, which is a very accessible location that the wide community is comfortable going to. There's a huge parking lot and a main bus route. So that generic language is important. We want to know what your priorities are, but also back it up with an example. Understand that panelists may be reading over 50 requests. Help them by prioritizing clarity. Give examples to explain generic statements. Know who is on the panel. Don't assume they know who you are or have knowledge of your references. For example, if you're a playwright and you're applying for a playwriting competition, you might mention that you're workshopping your play, or you might mention the word dramaturgy. But the panel may not know what those are. And you would use a different language if you were applying to a playwriting residency that you would for this grant. And like a lot of writers or artists are applying to amazing, prestigious conferences or artist residencies that all writers and artists know about to be the best in the country, but the panel may not know that. So if you want to go to the AWP conference, write down that it's the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. Say that it's the biggest and most well-known conference in the writing world, or at least that's what they said on their website, because we won't know. Last year, somebody wrote an ArtSet application all about KDT. And I didn't know what KDT was. It's Kids Discover the Trail. But that's what I'm saying. Just be aware that we may not know what you know. Well, years ago, I administered this grant in Cortland County, and it was for a countywide program. Apparently, it was I forget the guy's name. Let's say Carl Jones. It was Carl Jones Day. There were Carl Jones readings, Carl Jones events in the school, Carl Jones events at bookstores. Guess what my question was? Who's Carl Jones? Apparently, I don't have the name right, but it was a writer in the 19th century who was a Cortland resident, and all the kids read their books, but they didn't write that. So grant writing advice. Here's something else. This is really good advice. Connect to panelists' hearts. You want the panelists to think, I really want to go to that event, or wow, how exciting. Panelists are human, and they're going to respond to something that grabs their interest. When they say, I want to go to that, that's golden. This is fictionalized, but it's based on a true application. We had an application that had language that was everything I said it should be: factual, clear, everything I just told you to do. But it was a little boring. We will present a collaborative dance and music performance on the Commons on May 12th. The dancers will be Jane Jordan and Emily Yomepke, and the performance will be accompanied by local musicians Robert Green and Ana Fernandez. Additional musicians will perform acoustic repertory. We draw on themes inspired by community members. That's what I asked for. It's totally clear. But do you want to go? When they came into my office, these two people who wrote this, they were so excited and enthusiastic, and I suggested that they put that excitement into the request. It became, we are really excited about our upcoming performance on the Ithaca Commons on Saturday, May 12th from 2 to 4. Emily and I have been dancing and choreographing together for 5 years. We've been working hard and are ready to perform what we feel is a truly innovative and compelling body of work. We each have different styles. Emily is grounded in ballet, and I'm strictly modern. But when the two of us began to work together, ideas flowed, and the resulting resulting dance, we believe, is groundbreaking and exciting. Each piece that we will perform tells a story through dance and movement about people who have inspired us. Those people include Emily's mom, my second grade teacher, and the children we work with at BJM Elementary School who will be in attendance at this concert. They are very excited to see themselves in our performances. Robert Green and Ana Fernandez are Ithaca premier improvisational and experimental musicians, and when we started rehearsing with them, the work really coalesced. We can't wait for the public to see this performance. So now do you want to go? I think that's way more exciting for the panel to read. They're going to remember that. But you don't want to be jokey either. Like it is a New York State grant. So if anyone has looked at any of my social media, you'll see that I overuse the word awesome and way cool. That's how I talk. I think it's okay. But you want to walk a line when you're writing a grant between showing your excitement and not being silly or trying to be a comedian. Like most of my grants ask the question, will you be staying in Tompkins County through 2026? Just say yes. Don't say, I ain't going nowhere. So clear, personable, convey enthusiasm is good, neat, but not too jokey. Testimonials. If you want to include something from audience members about why they love going to your past events, that's great. Why does this program matter? Why do you want to do this? Why does the community want to go to this? Include what you need money for. It's hard to read this cartoon, but it says, it's a wonderfully written proposal, concise, well thought out, even interesting, but you never actually got around to asking for anything. Don't forget to mention what you need the money for. You might say, we need funds to pay the performers for rental of space. Panelists will read the narrative first, and then when they go to look at the budget, there shouldn't be any surprises in the budget. You should have explained what you need money for so that when they see the budget, they're like, I got it. You don't want them to have questions like, wait, what are the costumes for? Your written narrative and your budget provide the same information in two different ways. A cost included in the budget should be mentioned in the narrative, and a cost mentioned in the narrative should be listed in the budget. So in your narrative, you might say, this concert will include 15 musicians, and there it is in the budget. Or someone will look in the budget and see $600 for a filmmaker. And in the narrative, it explained that. So that's what I mean by the narrative and the budget should match. Very common mistakes. We're almost at the end. Very common mistakes are lack of clarity, sloppy writing, unanswered questions, poor presentation, irrelevant writing, responses that don't answer the questions, request is ineligible, the guidelines were obviously not read, budget doesn't balance, the math is wrong, or the expenses are made up or exaggerated. So here's my favorite part of this presentation, an example of a poorly written request and then the same request written, I think, beautifully. This is the exact questions that are in our GAP grant. Last year, this was all one question. It wasn't question 23, 24, 25. It was just question 23. And so I broke it out this year for 2025 into 3 different questions, but the samples still have it as one long answer, and that's why. So the question is, tell us about your project, go into detail, clear, factual, who's part of it, when, what, where. Make sure your narrative mentions and explains all your expenses. Community interest question, who's coming, demonstrated community interest, and who's administering it. Now, again, this PDF is on our website, or you can just screenshot this if you want to see it. But this is the not so great answer. The first paragraph, is this real? This is completely made up. The first paragraph is about a town that's in decline. It's okay to mention that, but they don't say why they're mentioning it, because then the next paragraph is about a chamber music series. I think they were trying to make a point that I'm not sure what the point is. The narrative says we have been presenting. That's one of the things where you're very close to your project. You don't realize that we don't know who we is, who's we. They go on about there's 10 musicians, exciting concerts. We perform a variety of music. We do not know how many concerts a year. Is it 2? Is it 10? When are the concerts? Afternoons, weekends, nights? Where are the concerts? Are they scheduled yet? What is the content of the concerts? Is there an admission fee? None of that is mentioned here in the narrative. They said concerts are sometimes attended by 50 people. I immediately wonder about the rest of the time. Are these professional musicians? They say they're from the college, but they don't say, is it avocational? Are they professional musicians? Who is the audience? Is it community members, or is it students or faculty from the college? Because without that information, we don't know whether it's a local audience or not. I just want to mention that projects that are up at Ithaca College or Cornell that are primarily for a student audience are not what we consider a Tompkins County general public, because they're not really Tompkins County residents. There's no social media. It mentions a mailer to membership. How many is that? Anyway, not a lot of information here. And I wrote all that. What I just said, it's on this slide, those questions. And here's a not great budget. What is 5 by 3 by 100? Is that 5 concerts by 3 musicians, or 5 musicians times 3 concerts? What is the space rental for? They didn't mention it. This is what I mean by the time you get to the budget, you should know exactly what this is for. Why do they need music stands? That just seems made up. I mean, musicians have their own music stands. I have 3 of them. Travel, who's traveling? Rental scores, I get that. Recording space, I don't know what that means. What's happening? It's not in the narrative. And then I wrote everything that I just said in this next slide. And then what follows are a whole bunch of slides, 1, 2, 3, 4, where I have rewritten this bad application, I think, beautifully. It talks about the musicians enjoy making music together, what their mission is, the board of directors. They have 3 concerts scheduled for 2025. They say when the first one is. They say what's going to happen. They say it's in the rural town of Medusa at the Medusa Fire Hall. There is a real town named Medusa because a friend of mine lives in it. Then the second concert will be in May. Argentinian composer, a city of Johnston, co-sponsored by the Johnston Latino Civic Association concert. So this says, I wrote this in here deliberately, the last concert will be in October and will feature a trio. We do not yet know the program for the 3rd concert. It's okay to not have every single detail nailed down on the January deadline for a project that's not happening until like next December. You just tell us as much as you can. Maybe you can say, we hope to do a concert in October at CSMA. We're not 100% sure yet. We have had our past concerts there. We will be thinking about whether or not what you're saying is feasible, but we don't expect that everyone has every detail nailed down. They talk about ADA compliant, because that's something in the guidelines. It's not a requirement, but you might get a higher rating. They suggest how they're advertising it. And then they're honest. Attendance at these conferences in the past has not been wonderful, although we have an enthusiastic core of followers. With the requested grant funds, along with these new ideas and innovations, we would like to increase our audience size and visibility. This is good. It's okay to be honest. It's okay to say, we didn't do that well last year. Here's what we want to do with this money. That's fine. You don't always have to present as being incredibly fabulous all the time. We get it. And I love the way this is written. And then they talk about interesting families and who they're going to work with. Jean at the Johnston Library, help spread the word, thinking of doing a separate family event. Awesome. Another idea here is about zooming in with the live composers and doing a little conversation with the audience. Then they say at the end exactly what they want the money to go to, exactly what they're going to do with it. And the last paragraph is they want to pay the musicians more. They were only paying them $25 each. They want to bring that up. This is beautifully written. So that's my example. And then we have a budget where everything in this budget was mentioned in the narrative. Actually, I'm not 100% sure the custodian was mentioned, but that is very clear. Custodian for 3 concerts. They've broken down the musician cost, the display ads, the recording and editing was mentioned. So this is a good example of a well-written application. Moving forward, a no is not necessarily a never. There's always different applicants, a different applicant pool, different panel, different amounts of money available. But if your request doesn't fit the guidelines or criteria, it might be a never. Like if you're consistently asking for a culinary arts program, it's not going to get funded. But I can talk to you about ways to make it fundable. Ask for advice and feedback, send me a draft, take this workshop. I may make suggestions if your application didn't fit the criteria very well. Like there was the Ageless Jazz Band started doing concerts in rural areas, and they went way up in the ratings because there wasn't a lot happening in some of the rural areas that they were going to. And that was something I suggested. So thank you very much. I know there was a lot of information thrown at you, and I hope that this demystified the process rather than just like completely overwhelming you. And if you're interested, take a look at the guidelines, and I am here to help. Email me. Stop recording.